Thanks, everybody. Happy Friday and happy Halloween. If you want to come off video or come on video and show us your scary costume, I'm joined by Sachin over here. He's already in his very scary costume here. Just kidding.
That's right.
Quick housekeeping before we get started. Again, we're going to kind of go through our discussion here. And if you have questions throughout the discussion, feel free to drop them in the chat. Or on the other end of the discussion, we're going to have a Q&A where you folks can, again, come off mute, ask them yourself if you prefer to do so that way. Because we love the engagement. We love it when you guys come off mute and have those actual conversations. That's what we're here for. So with that, let's start today's partner power up. So we're going to tackle something I know a lot of you folks have been wrestling with, which is what does the next generation order management system actually look like? And this is beyond sort of the marketing speak, right? This is some of the real architectural decisions and the capabilities that, separate some of the existing legacy systems for the next generation. So to dig into this, I'm joined by Sachin Sharma from KIBO. So Sachin, thanks for joining us. Maybe before we start, do you want to kind of tell some of the folks here a little bit about KIBO and sort of your role at KIBO?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Jason, for having me and to the whole OMG crew. Thank you, everybody, for the time and for tuning in. Really looking forward to the discussion today. And like Jason said, as you all have questions, please feel free to ask. I've totally good with people interrupting me in real time and asking questions. We could save them to the end, very, kind of informal on that front. So do whatever feels right to you. Like Jason mentioned, I'm the Chief Product Officer here at KIBO. I've been with the business since the middle of 2018. So it's been a little over 7 years at this point. Um, I've had a few different roles at KIBO, but for the last 5, 6 years have been in product management. And for the last few years have been the CPO. So KIBO is a digital commerce platform company, right? We have products across categories all on a single platform. We offer enterprise grade products across e-commerce, order management, search, subscriptions, reverse logistics, and very soon to be dropship as well. So obviously, in the context of today's discussion, we'll be focusing on order management and adjacent modules. So really kind of more on the, core OMS concepts and then reverse logistics coming off of that, dropship coming off of that, subscriptions maybe we'll touch on. But, very fully featured platform in all of those areas. We're in the MACH Alliance. So, fully MACH compliant from an architecture perspective, a real microservices platform. Most of our business, just from like a segmentation market perspective, a lot of omni-channel B2C retail. So, a lot of our clients have brick and mortar storefronts. They also sell on third-party marketplaces. They also have strong dropship programs, right? They also, are obviously selling just in person, right? Like off the street foot traffic. We do a fair amount of work in B2B as well. And that's not just on the e-commerce side, that's on the order management side too, just to make sure. And then, of course, given some of our subscriptions capabilities, we have some direct to consumer clients as well. But the two primary segments for us are really omnichannel retail with a brick and mortar component, and then B2B, where we have distributors, manufacturers, and the like. And we have clients all over the globe. So that's a little bit of a high level feel for KIBO, a little bit about our product portfolio. Very slightly dipped into architecture, which we'll go into more, and then my role at the business.
Awesome. Thank you, Sachin. Appreciate it. So let's just dive right into it. Setting the stage here, as you kind of had already highlighted, the demands on sort of order management systems have really exploded, right? So between all the different stores, DCs, omni-channel fulfillment, real-time inventory, so many different locations, all the complex reverse logistics and returns and dropship orchestration, subscriptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on and on.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so obviously, most of the legacy systems are sort of built for, a simpler era when all these sort of capabilities weren't necessarily needed or as complex as they are now. So, I guess from your vantage point at KIBO, what's sort of driving the urgency around this quote unquote next gen, order management, right? And sort of what sort of change that made some of the legacy systems, which I know we already sort of just talked about, less functional in that sense, and the need is there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, great question and totally makes sense. I'll preface this by saying, and I won't say this is the answer for every question. It's probably true of every question. Order management, as this group knows, probably way better than the vast majority of the world, is very complicated. And so I think there's a lot of drivers that are driving, the trend that you just pointed out, Jason. But I'll try to pick just a few that we really see from the KIBO perspective, and apply that, kind of qualifier to all of my answers for the rest of today. So, if I were to think about it and abstract it up a little bit, I think there's kind of three core drivers that we really see as it pertains to what is driving re-platform decisions or migration decisions from legacy OMSs to modern OMSs, and particularly KIBO. The first is kind of total cost of ownership, or TCO, or just cost broadly, right? Cost to maintain, cost to modernize, cost to enhance of legacy applications, whether those are commercial applications or those are legacy in-house applications. That is a core trend that we see on both sides when we get into OMS re-platforming decisions. These systems have just become expensive. There's a lot of, human capital that is required to run them, and that translates into a lot of time, that translates into a lot of cost. The second is experience modernization. So if we think about things, when I say that, if we think about things like just modern, probably easiest to understand from a B2C perspective, shopper experiences, things like showing accurate estimated delivery dates pre-purchase, things like showing inventory availability on a product listing page or a search results page where there might be 48 SKUs or 60 SKUs or 70 SKUs, things like being able to change routing strategies in a way that's going to allow you to capture more sales up front. Doing that on a legacy system is something that we hear repeatedly is very difficult, either from a performance perspective. Like if you're thinking, I'm shopping a store and I'm looking at a page that has 100 products and I have to make a call into an inventory service to understand inventory availability across 100 products and have that come back in, 100 milliseconds, that's not a trivial problem, right? Getting accurate estimated delivery dates that's taking into account all of the routing assignment, all of the rules that are defined, carrier shipping rates, all of the stuff that might be in there, evaluating that in real time in a performant manner and showing it on a storefront, that's a difficult problem. And so that's kind of the second, abstract, bucket that we see driving these re-platforming is what I'll call experience modernization and the difficulty of doing that on legacy applications. And then the final one I might point out, which has been coming up for us a lot this year, is kind of onboarding new channels. So, a lot of our prospective clients this year, and even in our existing client base, but prospective clients this year that have been making the decision to migrate OMSs are adding additional digital channels. So those might be third-party marketplaces. Those might be strategies like creating a dropship program, turning their own storefront into a marketplace, maybe expanding into cross-border shipping, in some way, shape, or form, a sales channel or a new fulfillment methodology, or kind of a new market, what you might say from a strategy perspective. Doing that on legacy OMS can be difficult. It can be challenging. It can take a lot of time. And while you're doing a big initiative like that, many folks start to think, why don't I just change my system? And it might be time to modernize. And so those are kind of maybe three core drivers that we see, but certainly not an exhaustive list.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can imagine again all those three buckets and a million other reasons why our folks are driving towards, that next gen system with the complexity of all the necessity, right? Everything that's needed behind order fulfillment there. So awesome. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about architecture here. So I know KIBO is built on MACH principles. So for folks sort of evaluating next OMS, can you sort of break down why MACH architecture really matters, and what business problems does that solve for? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kick off for anyone who might not be familiar, MACH stands for microservices based, API first, cloud native, and headless. And generally, right, there's the MACH Alliance that has sort of stamped software vendors in the digital commerce space as adhering to these principles from a architecture perspective. Also SIs who have practices in deploying MACH technology and advising on kind of MACH transformation initiatives, and a couple of other segments of the market, public cloud providers, et cetera. of adhering to kind of this framework. And so, like I mentioned earlier, KIBO is a business that's in the MACH Alliance. There's other OMS vendors in the MACH Alliance as well. And there's a few things I'd point out here from like a why it matters and the benefit perspective. The first is, I think as we think about really the microservices and API first concepts, I think are really key here in terms of like the four, letters in MACH. That allows you to incrementally modernize a platform migration. So if you had decided, right, hey, I'm going to migrate my OMS, and you're going through that process of picking one, but you know that you're going to do it, you have to think about how you're going to get there. Are you going to do kind of a big bang and on one day cut over from OMS 1 to OMS 2? Or are you going to do something where you're actually swapping out components of your legacy OMS, kind of chipping away at the monolith incrementally, leveraging components from the new OMS, and then at some point in the future, you'll be fully on the new OMS. If you want to pursue that second strategy, which de-risks implementations to a very large extent, you need to purchase a technology that is microservices oriented and API first. Otherwise, it is going to make that process either extremely difficult or potentially impossible. The second thing is maybe you don't know that you want to necessarily swap out your OMS wholesale, but you need new OMS capability that your existing OMS doesn't have or that you don't want to build into it. Then you can go to, right, a MACH compliant OMS, whether they're in the MACH Alliance or not, just someone who's MACH compliant and get that module from them, provided that that's a capability that they have in their portfolio, and add that on as an adjacent capability to your existing OMS and kind of bring to bear the experience, capability, whatever you're trying to drive by procuring that thing. That might be reverse logistics, that might be subscriptions management, that might be a new order routing, engine, whatever that is. You're probably doing that for some reason, and that'll allow you to bring to bear the capability and the benefit of that. And so, through that lens, the business benefits, in my opinion, at least, are really like de-risking that implementation. If you know you're going to migrate, you can do it in increments, which we always advise to our clients. And we see a trend generally in the market from talking to our SI partners around that. And, technology is very important for that. Secondly, like I mentioned, bringing to bear new experiences by buying like modules or part of a capability of a MACH compliant OMS platform, and that's going to allow you, for example, it could be something like what we talked about earlier, like accurate estimated delivery pre-purchase or showing inventory visibility throughout the buyer journey. We know from tons and tons of research that's out there that those are things that drive conversion. That's going to drive revenue, right? And so being able to go out and buy that capability just off the shelf as a single capability without buying an entire OMS will allow you to capture the benefit of like more revenue, in those cases as an example. Or it could be something like reverse logistics that's going to allow you to like route returns more efficiently, drive consumption of that inventory that you already own, not have to place new purchase orders to buy stock, not have to unnecessarily rebalance inventory around your network. And, that's going to drive profit at the end of the day. So all of those things are very real, business benefits that I think MACH compliant OMSs drive, whether that is de-risking implementation, which, is de-risking revenue of your existing business, whether that is driving revenue by unleashing kind of a new capability, or whether that is driving profit or efficiency in some way, shape, or form. So those are kind of my thoughts on that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Sachin. And I feel like we could go on and on and on about architecture. And I feel like in the past we've had a couple of sessions about just architecture alone. But for those benefits, I totally can see the virtue of the modularity and the benefits that sort of provides you from both de-risking, cost factors, and all sorts of things there. So let's now take a little shift and dive specifically into order routing. So again, a lot of folks are already doing some fairly basic order routing logic, right? Whether it's legacy or maybe it's a new system that they're on, whatever. But what does truly intelligent, order routing look like in the sense of extensibility? What does that look like? So maybe you can walk us through what a retailer, might configure something that's complex, like routing rules and sort of what happens when custom logic, is needed. It sort of goes beyond the outside the box capabilities of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing that I'll say is just from like an architecture perspective in terms of how to do it, that's obviously very, very much determined or correlated with whatever system you're using. There can be aspects of this that would require customizations or extension code to run during the order routing assignment, right? While that logic is actually being run in the platform, or would require calling out to a third-party system while the order routing engine is evaluating an order and breaking it down into shipments. In certain systems, that might just not even be possible, right? So you might have a use case where you need to do that and you literally can't. But outside of those kind of constraints, maybe just like let's take an example of like a long tail, use case, just to kind of get at like how complicated some of these things might be. You might have an order, maybe again, like some of this gets more and more complicated depending on what kind of experiences you actually allow for on your storefront. But I'll just think about things that are like possible if you were to use KIBO, right? So if you had an experience where your cart on the storefront can take multiple products, which probably, all of ours can. You can ship to different addresses in a single transaction. That seems to be somewhat more of a moderate to advanced capability. Not all platforms can support that, but let's assume that you could, and someone, gave three different shipping addresses and they're buying 10 different products and they're going to a combination of these. And then let's add on that they're also going to add in a product that's going to be an in-store pickup. And then let's imagine that that product, actually is not in inventory at that store and it's going to come in a transfer. If you have a complicated order scenario like that, that order is going to come into the OMS. It's going to be broken down. Those 10 items in whatever quantities they are going to be broken down into shipments. The ones that require ship to home are going to go through a routing assignment to pick the optimal location. The transfer is going to go through a routing assignment to pick the optimal location. Those rules that govern that can be anything ranging from really simple to like pick the nearest location to the destination location, which is trivial, to something that is way more complicated, like I'm going to set up filter conditions that I want to look at locations first that are within a 5 mile radius. And if there are none, go to a 10 mile radius. And if there are none, a 30 mile radius, and allow for, partial assignment of quantity, a line item that has, five quantity. If you find one in the first group, put that one there and take the other four and go to that, 10 mile radius group to take into other, attribute level considerations. Like let's say there's a product that needs to be shipped and it's a perishable product and it needs to be shipped in a container that has like a cold pack, and not all locations carry, not all fulfillment locations or DCs or stores carry cold packs. Those are attributes that you have to set up on the product, on the location, write a filter condition that marries those things up. You can think about layering in an additional filter of something like go to my location that has more inventory than others. So all else equal, I've checked the box on all of the, couple of higher level filters, and now I have 10 options and I want to pick the one that has the most amount of inventory on hand because, I want to burn that inventory down. So all of those things, and it could, start to get more and more and more complicated, of course. All of those things are those are very real scenarios. We see those scenarios in our client base today. And we see clients that want to do even more beyond that. And so I think as you think about how really specific you can get with your order routing assignment. Also, let's layer on what to do with from like a after action perspective. If you don't find qualifying locations, what are you going to do? Are you going to send the item to back order? Are you going to cancel the item? Are you going to send the item to customer care and kick off a workflow where someone contacts that customer or email them, right? What are you going to do? Managing all of that with all of the logic. You could imagine taking into account, carrier shipping costs in driving these location assignments as well. So it could get fairly complicated. There could be rules that you need to configure that are probably out of the box, like the radius one. Probably every system should have that. Some of these more complicated ones, like filter conditions or calling out to third-party platforms, maybe some of that is possible. Maybe some of that is not possible. Maybe some of that is possible only through writing code and not really through a UI. And so that's another consideration, like who is the, user persona, right? Kind of who's like the admin of this capability at the end of the day. And is that person going to need a UI, or are they a developer and they're going to write a bunch of extension code that then obviously, kind of leads into total cost of ownership and, cost to maintain and overhead and things like this. From a KIBO perspective, we provide a UI that allows you to do 95% of what I just articulated. So, I'm not a developer. I could do 95% of what I just articulated just through a UI by creating, attributes at the location level, at the product level, and then configuring rules in a UI, configuring the filter conditions in a UI, ranking locations, creating groupings of locations, handling the order routing after actions, all of that stuff can all be done via UI. And then there's a whole API extensibility layer that would allow you to do things like call out to a third-party platform, allow you to write, extension code if there's something really advanced or custom that you need to do. And that is something that we think is really important and provides a lot of value to our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Making it accessible for the non-developer folks. So yeah, that's great. So on the flip side of that, sort of now focus, so that's more of the order routing, right? On the flip side, nobody really wants to talk about sort of reverse logistics and sort of the pain points associated with that. And so I guess. What does sort of a modern returns management need to really look like, especially with, such distributed inventory, complex sort of return to stock scenarios, whatever it might be? How do you sort of build an equally complex reverse logistics into a modern order management system as the order routing side of things?
Yeah, great question. So I'll first start out by saying that at least at Kibo, and I feel like a lot of our peers in the industry are similar on this. Like we feel very strongly that returns management is an OMS responsibility. I think this is an interesting thing, like because we also have an e-commerce platform. There's a lot of people who in the world who actually think return creation is responsibility of the e-commerce platform. And we have the benefit of living on both sides of the world, and and with that context, we really believe it's like an order management concern. And so creating a return is something that should happen in the OMS first, like from a services perspective. I don't really care where the UI is. Like maybe your CSRs are living in your e-commerce platform, that's fine. Or maybe they're living in like Salesforce Service Cloud, like that's fine. But where is the request actually coming into from a system of record perspective? We believe that should be OMS. So creating the return, specifying whether this is going to be this is a return that the customer's in front of me, they just walked into the store, or is it one that they're going to ship in, right? If they walked into the store, then obviously you're going to accept it there. If they are shipping it in, you're going to have to decide on the return location. And so that is something where we see really like varying levels of support from an OMS perspective. Everybody has, probably the very simple, like, I'm going to have a default, return location, right? That's going to go on like every label, or maybe there's going to be a few, and in this 20% of the United States, it's this one, or this part in this country, it's this one, whatever the case might be, like fairly sort of, high, like highly predefined, pre-configured type of location assignment and pairing of all of that, all the way to a rules engine that picks that location, right? And so in Q1 of this year, we rolled out a reverse logistics module that has a fully featured return routing engine, order routing, but like in reverse, right? So it's not picking the fulfillment location, but it's picking the return location with all of those concepts that I mentioned of like filter conditions, sorting, the grouping and after actions and partial assignment and the API extensibility, all of that stuff applies to the returns routing module, and that will pick the optimal return location that will go on the label. When that item comes into the return location, there's a UI, in our case, for someone to process that return, to actually, do things like say, what condition is it in? Did I receive all the quantity that I was supposed to receive? All of that. And that invokes a second rule set to choose a disposition location. The disposition location is a location that is, next in the inventory network. It might be further behind. It might actually be in front of. Maybe it came into a DC and now you're going to decide to put it at a store. Maybe it came into a store. Now you're going to decide to put it at a DC. Maybe it came into a DC. It's damaged. You're going to send it to a liquidator. Whatever that case might be, we rerun that. We recommend that location, and then there's a way to process that as well when it gets into that location. So I think thinking about that full, flow and logic, all of that is core from an advanced returns, capability or space, so to speak. And we believe that, returns is an OMS responsibility, which is, why we rolled this out. The other thing is, how the return is created. So in, self-service returns have been getting much more and more prevalent in the industry in the last few years, at least we've seen. I think prior to that and still today, a lot of retailers want to insert just a little bit of friction around returns creation, probably for very good reasons. And so you might not have the ability to like create a return embedded into your My Account page. But if you do, right, all of that stuff should be, kind of riding on top of it, interacting with your OMS. Again, at least in our, opinion. So taking this view of the world where returns is really a very OMS centric concept, we would encourage that order management systems or buyers of order management systems look at advanced returns capabilities from a, configuration perspective, API perspective, processing perspective, to be present, in the OMS and in a way where they can centralize returns management, whether that's return that's being created on, Amazon.com on their third-party marketplace or on their storefront, or it's coming in from a CSR, or whatever the case might be. And then you can also think about things like return to vendor. Let's say you run a dropship program and you don't want to accept these returns that were dropshipped by your vendor, your supplier, your trading partner. You want it to go back directly to them. That is another thing that one should think about when they are evaluating OMSs or evaluating returns management software applications.
Absolutely, and that's actually a good segue because now I do want to talk about dropship, which you had mentioned very early on, is that's something that's forthcoming. So again, there are a lot of suppliers, right, that when you're orchestrating in your OMS between all the different vendors, a lot of suppliers do an EDI transactions, right? How does sort of a modern API first platform really deal with the reality that all these suppliers do still require EDI in that transaction?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this one's super exciting. Really, really big for us. We've spent a lot of time on this, and this calendar year in 2025, and our dropship marketplace capability is coming out next month actually, and we've seen a lot of interest from our clients and prospective clients on that, which is very exciting. I think there's a big shift that at least we've been seeing over the last 10 or 11 months here, where if we look at it, let's look at it kind of how we see a lot of the market looking at it, which is really through an EDI perspective, which you mentioned, Jason. So it's actually like dropship is really important, but a lot of the trend I think that's driving this is really from an EDI modernization perspective. There's a lot of legacy EDI applications that are out there in the world, EDI translators. Some people have built their own in-house kind of, methods for exchanging EDI with their trading partners. And all of that, mostly today, at least what we've seen, again, heavily qualifying all of this, is built off the ERP. And we have a lot of clients that are trying to modernize their ERPs. A lot of, AS400 still out there in the world. A lot of, generally on-prem legacy ERPs out there in the world. And this EDI capability is built on the back of that. And it's being used for procurement, and it's being used for dropship, and it's being used for financial transactions that are being sent by EDI. All EDI is being centralized there. So that is kind of like one contextual backdrop of this whole picture. The other thing, again, in our case, being an order management, vendor, is all of these, retailers and merchants, whether they're our client today or they're a prospective client, they're talking to us primarily because they're interested in modernizing their OMS. So they have this problem of legacy EDI. They either have a modern OMS, which they bought, let's say recently, or they're looking for one today. And then, they run a dropship program. And so they say, hey, can we move, we're trying to chip away at our ERP. Can we move EDI to your OMS? or to an OMS. They'll ask this question of every OMS vendor that they're looking at, let's say. And that is something that we started to see a lot at the end of last year. And so that is what drove our decision to build a fully featured dropship marketplace and EDI module that sits on our platform that works with our OMS. And so we can do all parts of the flow, like there's the core parts of inventory management and location management and order routing. We've had that, for forever, that can get the product assigned to a location in the OMS. Okay, that's great. People have been doing that in our OMS or in any OMS for a very long time. Now what we're rolling out is the ability to translate that shipment into, an 850 EDI message, a purchase order message that goes out to the vendor's, van or directly into their EDI translator by, like AS2 or X12 or whatever that is, whatever format of the message that they're using, and having that communication directly between the OMS and the vendor. And then, of course, get back the purchase order acknowledgement, the ASN, the invoice, append all of the data where it's required, move the shipment along its fulfillment flow, and also use our EDI platform for all of the, communication with trading partners that might be suppliers and otherwise, because they want EDI centralized, right? And so our capability is not locked down just to dropship, but that's of course where you would see, like a direct integration between the OMS and EDI. And then all of the concepts of, self-service vendor onboarding, being able to send, product listing and product information management via EDI, being able to send inventory updates via EDI, being able to communicate about returns via EDI, all of those things supported out of the box, between, the OMS, the EDI application, and all the trading partners. And then UIs, people might have smaller drop shippers where they're not trading EDI. They're just, that smaller drop shipper just needs a UI to see that there's an order that they need to fulfill and print a label and put it in a box and do all of that, so we're building these very user-friendly UIs as well to do that kind of stuff. But broadly speaking, this is a big trend that we've seen. It's coming off of the back of modernizing EDI, and then a lot of these folks looking for modern OMSs, and it makes a great deal of sense for the OMS to be sending those EDI messages directly because all the orders are coming in there. Dropship is important, whatever the case might be, and then the rest of it is, wherever you're creating purchase orders, that's going to have to go out to an EDI application anyways, whether it's straight from your ERP or otherwise. And so, folks are pretty receptive to just integrating, with another EDI application from that perspective. So those are some really interesting, trends I think that we've seen that's driving the need for this, the interest in this, the benefit of this, and something that's, really exciting to us this year.
Yeah, no, and that's really exciting, Sachin. So, thank you for that little sneak peek behind the curtain on the dropship module coming out. And I think that's just so important. And when you're talking about, again, these next generation OMS systems versus some of the legacy players, having your ears on the ground, understanding the need for it, and again, understanding everybody's where they are in their modernization journey. And again, that makes perfect sense to release that in tandem with your OMS. So really interesting stuff. Let's shift over to inventory management. So we've talked about it quite a few times. There's so many different nodes and fulfillment locations, stores, DCs, 3PLs, whatever it might be. How do you, from your perspective, how are you creating that unified view of, inventory that, everybody talks about, but not necessarily everybody actually achieves, with so many different, sales channels and things like that. And sort of, yeah. So if you want to just kind of talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this one's really important. I mean, for me, probably for a lot of us here, inventory management, order routing, fulfillment management. This is the lifeblood of the OMS. And so, we always encourage people to evaluate these capabilities really deeply when looking for an OMS. I think broadly speaking, if you have advanced inventory requirements in, enterprise grade kind of inventory requirements, you need to make sure of a few things. One, that you can model all locations in the network, whether those are first-party locations or third-party locations in the OMS. and that you could do that clearly. So there's like some way to create the location, there's some way to classify the location. You need to be able to make sure that you can send inventory at the location level so that ultimately the OMS can retain, SKU location level inventory. And that should be pretty basic, right? You might then have more advanced requirements like being able to store future inbound inventory, right? So if you want the OMS to know about future inbound inventory receipts at the location level that you're getting, you should definitely make sure that the OMS has the ability to do that and the ability to allocate against that and in a configurable way, right? You might be sending inventory data for the next 6 months, but you don't want to allocate orders today against the inventory that's coming in 6 months from now. It might not even come in 6 months from now. You want to allocate against the ones that are coming in the next 14 days, as an example. Make sure that, it has that kind of capability. Segmentation can be very, very important here. When we think about digital channels, if you're selling on third-party marketplaces and your own storefront, you might actually want to segment inventory for each of those channels separately. You might not want to just allocate inventory wherever the first order comes in. Maybe you want to protect more inventory for your first party storefront than you do your third party marketplace. And so segmentation could be important. If you have different conditions of inventory, maybe you have, stock that's been returned and you want to track it as returned versus stock that hasn't been sold yet. Maybe you have used stock that's been refurbished and you want to track it as such. Making sure that the OMS in the inventory service has the ability to condition inventory in some way, shape, or form, and then again allow you to allocate against that or not allocate against that in different scenarios. If you have perishable items, the inventory service should have the ability to manage things like expiry dates or sell by dates or some kind of form of a date because it's a perishable item and be able to allocate against that in some kind of intelligent way. So, all of these capabilities are really important from an inventory management perspective, the more and more advanced kind of inventory requirements that you have. The other part that's really important is how this data gets exposed. So making sure that the platform has, APIs, REST APIs, or GraphQL endpoints to be able to query into the inventory service at, probably pretty high load in a very performant manner to be able to provide back to you, different ways of summing up all of this inventory to say what's available in different conditions under different date, ranges, at different locations and different segments. Taking into account safety stock management, all of these things. There's so many ways to cut this data, making sure that it has the capabilities that you need and that you require, and that it can be, easily retrieved in a performant fashion and, displayed and shown on a storefront. And again, that could be for many, many products all at one time. And so, that's the other thing that we always encourage people to look at. And then the final piece that I think, is really relying on inventory management, but also a little bit on order routing, is if you are looking to your order management system to provide you with accurate estimated delivery dates, making sure that there are, again, APIs or some kind of method in real time to pull out the order routing assignment for that potential customer, like pre-purchase, right? So that you can give them the accurate EDD, which location you're choosing, when that location can fulfill, and then which carrier you can use and what their SLA is or their in transit time for whatever the service method is that you're picking, and then showing that all to the customer on the storefront pre-purchase. And that relies on, inventory management as much as it does order routing. So those are some core capabilities, core and advanced capabilities, that I would always encourage everybody to look at from an inventory management perspective when thinking about a modern OMS.
Awesome. Makes sense. Okay, now speaking about capabilities here, let's sort of talk about subscriptions, catalog, and promotions here. So some systems don't even have those capabilities, but then also they may live in different systems, right? So I know that KIBO integrates all three of those things together. Where do you see the value of those three living in order management system and sort of how are they um, you know, natively within order management, right? Subscriptions, catalog, and promotions. Where do you see that value?
100%. And this is huge for us. So we have, we have one platform, right? We have one tech platform, we have one common set of microservices, and then all of the solutions are, on top of all of those same microservices. So if you buy our e-commerce platform, you get a catalog service. You're doing a lot of stuff with that catalog service. You're doing all your merchandising for your storefront. If you buy our order management system and you want the catalog service, which is very, very common, we do that in 99.9% of our deals because there's use cases that require it. And that's a core reason why people look at our OMS. It's the same exact catalog service. You're just using it in a different way. It's not managing your merchandised categories and stuff like that you're showing on your storefront. Like that's just unnecessary, but it's the same catalog service. And so for us, catalog pricing, promotions, subscriptions leverages that same catalog service as well. And then order management, we frequently deploy these things together because our clients have use cases that require them. Now, what are some of those use cases, just to kind of put the dots together where the value comes out? If we think about something like order creation, we have a lot of clients that use our OMS and our call center UIs for their CSRs. And so if I call in and I want the CSR to place an order on my behalf, they're doing that in KIBO. If you're placing an order in a system, you need the product information in that system. So I guess you could call out to a third-party system to get that product information, I guess, but that's additional integration work, that's additional overhead, that increases your TCO, that reduces your time to market from an implementation perspective. It is more difficult objectively. And so in our system, you would just have that data in KIBO. You would add those products to, like a draft order. You would submit that order. You would choose all of the stuff that you need to choose, like, what is it being picked up? If so, at what location is it being shipped? If so, what carrier, what method? You can access all of the saved payment information. Someone could give you payment information over the phone. You can apply discounts. Again, that leverages the promotion engine and promotions that are configured. You can do all of that stuff. So like order creation, that's one simple use case. If you want to do that in your OMS, you should want the data to reside there from a catalog perspective with its appropriate pricing, with its relevant promotions. Because if you're running a 5% off, promotion on your storefront and someone calls in, you shouldn't charge them 5% more. You should give them that same 5% off, right? And that's one simple use case. The second one, another pretty simple one, is around returns and uneven exchanges. I bought this crew neck in a medium size and I want to return it and I want to buy a pair of pants. And these things are totally different prices and they're totally different products and they have nothing to do with each other. A lot of the time, that would require someone to take a return, issue a refund on that return, and then place a new order for the pants or for the jeans, whatever I just said. And again, placing that order is going to require the catalog information, all of that. In KIBO, you could do all of that in one single return flow, right? So like I can choose the product that I'm returning. I can choose another product that I'm now adding on to kind of a child order that's associated with that original order, and then handle everything in one transaction. And maybe it comes out that I'm no longer issuing a refund. I actually have to capture more dollars, right? Because the pants are more expensive than the crew neck. And now I need to add payment and capture additional payment. And then I'll ship that stuff out and I'll give the person a return label and they'll ship me back the crew neck. So that's like a second, like pretty simple, use case around uneven exchanges. This goes really on and on. I could go on for a long time just about this, one area, but you could think about things like substitutions, right? Like you're selling, perishable products, you're a grocery store. You probably do this all the time when you're shopping on Instacart or, hey, I want, curly leaf parsley. And if you don't have that, give me flat leaf parsley. That's a substitution that occurs post-order submit, right? That's something that you need to set up. You need to have product information to do that. If you do that, you're going to charge me more if, one form of the parsley was more expensive than the other, right? You might contact me throughout that flow to make sure that I'm okay with it when it's happening. Like doing all of that out of one system without integrating and tying together, 18 different applications becomes a lot easier when your core fulfillment system, which is the OMS, which needs to be the OMS, has catalog and pricing and promotion information with all of the rule sets around when can you substitute and what do you do? Do you change price? Do you not change price? Are there new promotions that need to be evaluated? Are there not? And handling all of that complexity all from one platform. And then the subscriptions one is probably like very self-explanatory, right? I mean, like, the subscription order comes in, we have a subscription object, we then create continuity orders, we have all of the editing directly to that subscription object. I want to add another product, I want to remove a product, I want to pause my subscription, I want to ship it to, a different destination just this one time because I'm going to be traveling. I want to add a product to my next subscription just this one time. All of that kind of stuff, changing payment methods, canceling, reactivating, all of these things and exposing all of that via API on a storefront. And arguably, more importantly, having one place for the CSR to go so that when I call in and I have a subscription and I need that thing modified, you can go to the OMS. You don't have to go to a separate subscription engine to modify the subscription directly, right? Or you don't have to integrate all of that stuff in to your CSR application. And so that's really how we see the world and the benefit of that stuff. I mean, these things are so difficult to disentangle, at least in our opinion, like from a use case perspective, from a technology perspective, that's, it's not trivial, but it's easy. Like my promotions are here. I need to go call out to the system. But from a use case perspective, it is really difficult to kind of like disaggregate all of these things and to say, oh, this doesn't need to be in an OMS. Like the use case is important. So let's have this stuff in the OMS. Let's have the CSRs in one place. Let's have the API calls coming into one place. That's at least our opinion, right? And that is reflected in how we have built the product over time.
Preach, preach. No, I think that creates, again, a ton of value, again, having that all in that one system. So awesome, makes sense. While you were talking, we had a question related to AI come in. So that actually was a good segue because I was going to talk about AI anyways. I mean, who isn't talking about AI and agentic AI specifically? So are there any use cases that you guys at KIBO have been, actually using it for and that have actually been working? And can you kind of give us a picture of what that looks like? The question itself, they were specifically interested in areas like inventory fulfillment and customer fulfillment experiences, but if there's anything just in general, and I guess how that really differs from, traditional automation, whereas you're actually using, agentic AI.
Absolutely, 100%. So this is a big area of focus for us and has been a big area of focus for us, I should say, this year. So in Q1, we rolled out our agentic commerce, offering, and that sits on top of the platform, and that can be used by clients that leverage any part of our stack. But again, let's take an OMS-centric view of the world here. So the first two agents that we released, one we call the shopper agent, the second we call the CSR agent. And so the shopper agent you could think of as a chat experience embedded on a digital channel where you are doing everything from product discovery all the way through to order placement, every single part of that journey. You are interacting with the agent to be able to ask all of those questions and go through that whole flow. And so again, very importantly, kind of like to the last, thing, we can do that because we have the catalog, we have pricing, we have promotions, we have a search application, we have all the inventory, we have all the locations, we have all the order routing rules defined, we have all the fulfillment, nodes, graphed, and all of the things so that you can ask a question like, I'm looking for a shirt. Can you recommend some to me? The agent can go hit the merchandising rules that are in the platform and return back the 5, or however many it's been configured for, 10, 20, whatever, shirts with little product cards and descriptions, or however you want to configure that experience. It's purely agentic. This is not like a legacy chatbot, canned response type thing. This is purely agentic, leveraging LLMs. We leverage Gemini for all of this and providing back all of that, and then asking about inventory availability, asking about when can I get this, asking questions about the products that are deep questions that require understanding of like product attributes that we have in our catalog, and then asking the agent to add to cart, right? And then many people don't actually want the agent to place the order. You get into some weird PCI world and around that. So most of it stops there, and then you go to your cart kind of traditionally, and you go through checkout. But it could apply like, saved shipping addresses and things of this nature, and speed that up. So doing all of that, and then post order submit all of the post order submit actions again through that interface. So asking like Wismo, right? Creating a return, all of that kind of stuff, right? You can do through that interface. Then when you think about it from the CSR's perspective, they come into our admin, they can chat with the agent. They can say, where is this order? Pull this order up for me. Create a return. It's prepping that information. Like the screen is moving in real time as you're asking it, and it's providing back to you answers. The actual UI is moving to get you to the right page in the normal UI. If you're doing something like creating a return, it will prep that screen for you, pre-populate it as you have prompted it to, and then you look at it and make sure it is correct, right? Like never skip that step, and then go ahead and execute. And so those are the two first agents that we released. We have clients that are already leveraging this stuff. We're working with partners of ours to build this out. Some who are on this call, today. One person who I saw is Zach from Proficient. Shout out to Zach and the Proficient team. They're working with us on a lot of this stuff. Starter kits around pre-integrating our framework with third-party applications because we do not want to lock clients into KIBO. Everything I just said can actually all work without any of the data in KIBO. So when the user types show me 5 shirts that are, winter shirts, if you use Bloomreach, we should go hit Bloomreach. We should not force you to give us your catalog and make you set up search merchandising rules in KIBO. Although you could do that, that would be pretty mean of us to do and would hurt us in a bunch of different ways strategically that we just don't want to do. And so what's a lot easier for us to do is we're just going to go hit Bloomreach and we're going to pull the data out of Bloomreach. If you're not even using KIBO for inventory management, like you literally don't have to use KIBO. If you use Sterling OMS, we'll go hit Sterling. So this is a purely standalone agentic commerce offering. Out of the box, of course, every bit of it works with KIBO, but any of those API calls, like the tools, if anyone's familiar, like the tool concept that the actual agent has access to, where that API call goes out to, you can direct it elsewhere. It doesn't have to come into KIBO. And so it's really a framework with the LLMs, with a lot of UI for configuration. You can configure all the stuff through UI. You don't have to be a developer necessarily to do it, which is like a very nice, experience. Allows you to do all of that. Then we get into the other agents that we've started to release in Q2, Q3, and more coming out here in Q4, which more I would call are from an operational perspective. So we have 4 classes of agents: the buyer agent, the CSR agent, what we call our engage agents, because you engage with them, right? You talk to them, they talk back to you. Then we have a set of configure agents, and these are for administrators to configure various parts of the platform. So this could be things like configuring product information, configuring a promotion, configuring order routing, which is something that we're going to do next quarter in Q1 of 2026, which is really exciting, configuring order routing rules through natural language, right? No longer clicking around the UI. Things like configuring reverse logistics, on and on and on. Then we have a third category, which we call explain. And these agents explain to you decisions that the system has taken. And so order routing, orders are being routed all the time. They're being routed to, we have clients that have as many as 9,000 fulfillment locations in their inventory network. You want to know why an order was routed to a particular location. We have order routing logs to do that. But if you're considering over 9,000 locations, like looking at the logs, it's not like that, that great. And so the agent will explain to you in natural language why was order 123 routed in the way that it was routed. It's going to provide to you in English language why that decision was taken by the system. That's coming out this quarter. Why was a particular promotion applied? You might have hundreds of promotions. They might be stackable. They might be not stackable. They might be targeting orders. They might be targeting shipment. They might be targeting line item. They might be targeting extensible attributes. It's not trivial to understand that. And so the agent is going to explain it, right? And then the final category of agents are what we call the tune agents. That'll be coming out next year. We haven't released any of that yet. Engage is out. A lot of it, configure is out. A lot of explain is out or will be coming out. But tune is going to come out next year. And those are agents that help to optimize the system. So tuning order routing to optimize for a particular outcome metric. Please reduce my split shipments by 10%. Taking that in, running through a bunch of scenarios from historical orders that have been routed, understanding how that goal metric would have been achieved, what other unintended consequences of that might have happened if you were to have tried to achieve that, try to adjust and balance for all of these things, provide back those recommendations to the order routing administrator, who can then decide, do they want to apply that new rule set that the tune agent is recommending, or tell it to apply it, it will apply it. And then you really get into this like autonomous agentic approach over time. And so we've taken an approach where we wanted to stair step this, starting with buying experiences that drive revenue and CSR experiences that save time. And those are two like clear ROI metrics that, are clear as day, make it very easy and like easy to drive business cases around for our clients. And then go into more of the, administrative operational stuff, which people like, but, I don't think it's going to cause anyone to buy an OMS or something, hey, I saved a few minutes here and there. And then getting into the explain stuff, which is really powerful, starts to get into like human assisted changes. The system can tell you why it did something. And then you could still think about, okay, what should I do next? And then finally getting into tuning, which puts quite a bit of the onus on the agent, which is something that everybody is still a little bit hesitant around, right? Which is why it's what we're doing last. UIs for all of this stuff, the ability to configure all of this stuff. And then again, the engage agents, they don't have to work with KIBO at all. They can work with KIBO a little bit. They could work with KIBO entirely. They could work with KIBO not at all. But we still have the LLMs, the UIs, and the framework and the extensibility layer to integrate with any of those other third-party applications in the stack. So a lot that we're doing from an agentic perspective at the moment.
I can't tell, Sachin. Are you excited about AI? Because it's
Super
hard.
excited. Talk about it all the time these days. I could get on and on.
No, that's awesome. That's great. So we made it to the top of the hour. So I just want to open it up. I know if anybody else has additional questions, one came in. Are you incorporating AI into the order routing capabilities, allowing it to automatically modify the order routing logic based on history-based learnings?
Exactly. Yes. So that's what the tune agent is going to do. That is something that we will be getting into next year. And
Okay.
clients will have the ability, like I mentioned, to optionally to say, like, give the agent the autonomy to actually make the rule change or not.
Okay. Great. And again, if anybody has questions, feel free to come off mute. There's one other question this is in regards to EDI and reverse logistics. With reverse logistics and EDI, potentially more to come, which were considered outside of OM integrated into KIBO? Doesn't it make the package too big or complex? Or do you have modularized these functions as microservices or pluggable modules that can be hooked into, say, Salesforce Commerce?
Yes. So all that can be sold on a standalone basis. The entire dropship module can be used, not used at all, used in tandem with OMS, used on its own in tandem with someone else's OMS. It is a standalone application. Everything that we build at KIBO is meant to be really deployed on its own. So like you could literally deploy our inventory service on its own. You could deploy our catalog service on its own. Like you don't have to buy e-commerce, you don't have to buy OMS. And then the way that we price and package is very flexible. So we try to stay away from people building like completely bespoke configurations of all these things. It's a nightmare, but to price. But we have, very palatable like prepackaged business capabilities or PBCs that are like collection of a few microservices, and we have a bunch of those. And then we have solutions that are combinations of PBCs, like the e-commerce platform, the order management system, dropship, subscription, search, etc. And then we have, the whole platform.
Awesome, great. And then I think we have one more question. When you said the user would be able to instruct the agent to reduce the splits by 10%, wouldn't the current rules-based engine be already operating in the fully optimal way? What would the agent be doing any different?
No, I mean, current rules engines in OMS today, as far as I'm aware, I think all of them in the market are really based on heuristics that you configure, right? So, like, there's a human being that has hopefully analyzed data, sometimes not even from what we've seen, that says, this is how we want to allocate orders. We want to consider this group of locations first, and then that group of locations. We want to, apply some logic on top of that. But those things are static. So if that is resulting in orders being split 20% of the time, nothing's going to change that until the human changes the rule. So what we're trying to get into with the tuning agents are the taking an agentic approach to, I think someone previously asked, like, back test the data, understand different scenarios of different rules that could be configured to drive different outcomes. What would be the benefit of that? What would be the negative of that? And then, expose that to the administrators, or allowing the agent to make those changes on its own. And it can do that on a continuous basis as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, we're already a couple minutes over the hour. I just wanted to thank you, Sachin, so much. This has been
Thank
a
you.
great discussion. And with that, I will let everybody go, and I hope everybody has a great weekend and a happy Halloween. And thanks again so much, Sachin, for joining us today and sharing all this information. So. Um,
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the time. I hope that everyone has a fantastic weekend. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any other questions or you ever want to chat about any of this stuff.